Ladies and gentlemen, it's July 5th at 9 p.m. This is Crime and Culture Live. I am Tim here today with Lance. How's it going, Lance?
I literally couldn't be more excited about the conversation we're about to engage in. I'm doing very well. It's a beautiful night. We're here with some beautiful guests. But Tim, again, the question on everyone's lips, how are you?
I am doing great tonight, Lance. Thanks a lot for asking. We are being joined by three lovely ladies tonight here on Crime and Culture Live. It is Rabia, Chaudry, Celene, Beth Calderon, and Sarah Cailean. How are you three doing tonight?
Doing great.
Doing well.
Thank you. Thank
Hi,
you,
everybody.
gentlemen.
Hi, thank you very much for joining us. We're very excited to speak with you all tonight.
Yes. Apologies for dropping the ball there on what was my segue to thank you all for joining. I was just looking at the YouTube channel building up. We're close to 13,000 viewers right now. Just kidding. We are definitely getting a lot of people that are joining, and this is the place to engage with us, to have a conversation with us, and discuss with us this important topic that has been floating around. I feel like it's been floating around for a long time, and everybody's been talking about it. And I'm just so humbled that we're the platform that you all chose. So thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you for lending your platform to us.
Yeah.
I mean, like these conversations have been going on, like you said, for a long time, offline, for those of us in the industry of true crime. I mean, this is our work, our passion. It's what we love to do. And we want to see a healthier space. And so thanks for allowing us to talk about this on your show tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, we are here to speak about ethics and standards in true crime. And before we get into that, I just want to sort of start with introductions, I guess. If everyone could just go around and I guess introduce yourself and what it is you do.
Who wants to start?
Who wants to go first?
You go first, Celene.
I'll go first since I'm asking. Hi, I'm Celene Beth Calderon Olsen, and I am a TV and film producer, director. And I am also a newly podcast host. I don't know why I say that. I don't know. It's not that new, but yeah. So that's me. I'm with the Chosen Ones podcast, and then I'll talk about my other work later. So yeah.
I think we should save the best for last, so I'll go next. I am Sarah Cailean. I am a homicide investigator and criminal behaviorist, and I still work as an investigator, but I also kind of work in the true crime space. Either answering questions for other people about cases that they're working on, or covering for a podcast or a documentary or something, or every once in a while getting to work on documentary series or podcasts about. Sorry, did you guys lose me, or am I?
You can hear
no?
you.
You're
Okay.
still talking.
My earbuds just told me that they disconnected, but apparently not. At any rate, I do also get to do some true crime content creator work of my own.
I'm Rabia Chaudry. I am an attorney by profession, and I have become a podcaster. I've been podcasting for 7 years, and I work with two other attorneys on the Undisclosed podcast for 7 years, where we examine wrongful conviction cases, and many of them we reinvestigate. We work very closely with the attorneys and defendants in the cases, and our sole objective for that work in the true crime space is to bring these defendants home. Beyond that, I have a couple of other podcasts that are not true crime related, Nighty Night, and I did the 45th and the Hidden Gin and some other creative projects, and have a couple of books now under my belt, and executive produced this thing back here, and still working on getting Adnan home. So thank you guys for having me. I'm excited.
Heck yeah. Thanks for joining us. And this all started a few days ago when I was just catching up on Twitter, and I noticed that Celene Beth had been taking a stance on some topics. So we had her on the show a couple of times, and we're friends in this industry, and I wanted to reach out. So we reached out to her just to make sure everything was cool. And she was like, we really need to do this. And it's not directly related to why we reached out to her, but she said that we needed to do this because actually Shiloh had a good comment. I said that this issue was floating around out there, but she said it's not floating, it's got legs. And that's true. So it's important. And this platform is for the three of you, and it's also for everybody who is in the chat right now to discuss why this is important and why we talk about ethics. And I think what we need to do is like define ethics and standards first, and then talk about like what we do as true crime content creators and where that drop off happens. So I'm not sure who wants to start with that. I'm not sure who to toss it to, but I'm sure everybody has an opinion on it. You want to go alphabetical?
First or last names?
Actually, well, we're all C last names.
Oh,
so.
I don't even know. Every time we talk to Celene Beth, she's got a new, like another name. So she's got like 17 names now. So I'm not sure which
Pretty
one.
Much. Which one we're going by, my married name or now maiden name? I think Sarah. Sarah's a really good person to open this up. So.
I was going to say you, but okay. So I can certainly say that when it comes to the work that I do, both in the true crime space and in the investigator space, for me, that work, I have the same set of standards. And so, my standards in the investigator space are, because I work almost exclusively on cold cases, and every once in a while I get invited to work on a wrongful conviction case, which I'm excited to do. But I see those very much as cold cases as well. You're essentially starting a case from scratch that has long been considered put to bed. And in doing that, I don't just come into it as an investigator. I have to come into it as a victim advocate, because the majority of the cases that I work on, they tend to be sexually violent cases, sexual homicide or serial predator related, and they are overwhelmingly victims from marginalized communities. So they are sex workers, they are women of color, they are people who have been largely ignored in the past, and by virtue of their membership in a marginalized community, that is essentially, in my mind, the majority of the time, that's why the case went cold in the first place. Not deliberately necessarily, but through a lack of pressure from the media, pressure from the public, and then it's easier for the police to kind of set it aside and move on to other stuff if it doesn't solve quickly. And so when I come in, from the word jump, a case for me has to be about really getting to know the victim, and not in a cursory way, and not in what has been printed in the past, but to truly get to know them as a valuable, important human being. And when I say that stuff, I feel like we hear that a lot in true crime now, but I feel like a lot of times it is lip service. And I think that we've gotten so used to expecting people to say, I'm here for the victims, I want to do this and that and everything, that we sometimes allow that to be good enough. And it's really important that we actually recognize that that's what it is. So for me, the content creator stuff, it's just a natural segue into the way I talk about the victims or the way I treat them even behind the scenes. It just carries over from the work. And I will say that almost every case that I take on, even as an investigator, but certainly, if it's something I'm going to discuss in the public eye, the first thing I do after sort of a preliminary look at the case is reach out to the family, because not every cold case victim's family necessarily wants it reopened. Sometimes there is a tremendous amount of pain that they are just not comfortable with that. And so the majority of the time, that is where I start. And I'm just like, this is just like one example. And I don't mean to say that like, this is the only thing that matters or this is the only thing. But I guess what I'm saying is that I think if you have a personal set of ethics, and I know that everybody has stuff that they truly believe in, it has to be about not just paying lip service to that. It has to be about finding a way not only to demand that of yourself, but to demand it of the other people you work with in the space and to demand it of the audience as well. At least for me, like I don't want an audience that's just there for voyeuristic true crime. That is a lane of true crime. You know, have at it if that's what you enjoy and that's what you want to make, but that's not what I traffic in. And so I expect the same things from the audience that I deliver to that I would from the people that I work with. Does that make sense? Okay.
Heck yeah.
I'll stop babbling now. I feel like I'm just rambling.
Totally not babbling. And I think we have an hour to do this particular episode, this live show, and we're not going to solve the problems tonight. We're not gonna solve it. But I think your foundation there, your start, your entry into this conversation was great. Demand it from the audience that it's you know there is voyeuristic true crime content consumption. And I think that's a good line to start at.
Yeah, well, and I mean, and if that's what you want and that's what you're here for, you know, I mean, I guess that's fine. There's always going to be content creators who make that. But when we talk about sort of this renaissance of true crime that has come about since Serial and since Adnan's case was first discussed and Heyman Lee was first discussed, that renaissance has been in part because content creators discovered for the first time what has always been true is that the audience is overwhelmingly female. And when they discovered this, they were a little slower to figure it out, but they have largely figured out that audience also wants advocacy to be a part of a lot of this work. Again, not all of it. There's always going to be schlock. And that's fine if that's what you enjoy. I don't watch horror movies either. You know what I mean? Like that's just not my jam, but you do you. But the audiences want a way to be an advocate as well. I think the majority of these sort of female audiences that we're talking about, the ones that Rabia and Celene, Beth and I tend to make content for. So I think the next question is then, how do we get them involved and how do we ask them to demand better? And then the creators will be forced to be more accountable.
Can I jump in though? It's interesting, Sarah. I don't know if I'm on completely the same page as you about this. I think we tend to draw the audiences. Every creator draws the audiences that reflects like their own values. I mean, that's how I think. I mean, like, you know what I mean? We know there are true crime podcasters who are exploitive, who are voyeuristic, who are highly unethical, who clearly against the wishes of the people who are deeply involved in their stories, or the people who the stories are about, they're reporting about, are like, please don't do XYZ. I'm begging you not to do this. Don't cover the story. Don't play that tape. They still do it. And those people are always going to have an audience too, because there will always be people who are attracted to that kind of content, right? Or they're going to be attracted to like the gore that they might like, with Undisclosed, it was really, when we started Undisclosed, I was like, okay, maybe lawyers will listen to us. But who is going to listen to like 30 episodes of 3 lawyers, like digging into like every little, but there is an audience for it, but it's a very specific kind of audience, right? Like, so I really feel like the quality of your content is going to determine the quality of your audience, frankly. But another thing I want to talk about in terms of like the ethics that we enter the work with, I want to point out, Sarah is a professional outside of the true crime podcasting and content space. I'm an attorney. Celene is a journalist. I believe your background is as a journalist. So we come from fields that already have ethical standards built in, right? So we're coming to this work already with like some kind of built-in professional standards that we have to hold ourselves to. So when I'm working on a case for Undisclosed, I'm not going to do it, obviously, if the defendant is not on board. I will not do it unless the lawyer for that defendant is on board. In every case, we reach out to the victims' families to see if they have anything to say, anything to offer. So far, in 24 cases, we have never gotten even a response, other than one case in which the victim's family, in fact, this is the case that Sarah worked on with me for our final season, was like, listen, if they have the wrong person behind bars, we want to fix this. that's like a double tragedy. Like, so do the work you're doing. And, you know, so, and Susan Collin are the two other attorneys who work with me on these cases. You know, we're very, very careful about maintaining confidentiality and not reporting every single thing we find, because we are thinking as attorneys, right? At the end of the day, we are licensed attorneys. I don't want to lose my law license, right? I don't want the profession of law to be like, okay, you want to be a true crime podcaster, well, then you can't be a lawyer, because what you're doing is like, you know, you're breaking the ethical boundaries that we have. But the problem is, not everybody comes to this work from a professional background that has ethical standards. They just don't. So then you end up with this wild.
I would say that even some of the ones who do are not necessarily honoring those ethical standards, which is another
right. That is true.
Bag of problems.
That is true, because suddenly they're not acting the way they would in their own professional space, probably, as they are out here. Because like I said, I keep saying this, it is the Wild West. So the question for me is like, who sets the standards? How do we do it? Is there some formal way to do this? Or is it just going to be kind of a marketplace where we, as a community of true crime podcasters, decide certain things are not acceptable? This is how we're going to address these kinds of issues, and this is how we're going to hold people accountable for bad behavior.
Yeah. So, I mean, now branching off of both of these things, I think naturally gets into my field, which is primarily TV and film producing true crime content. And when I'm brought on to a project, I have to go through a checklist for my own morals. So is this going to be exploitive? Do we have consent from family members? You know, what is our overall take with this? Because at the end of the day, we are focusing on people's trauma. We're focusing on the worst, most horrific things that somebody can experience. And if you don't have those ethics and standards to say, hey, this is how we need to, you know, show the world this story, what's the point, right? Because I feel like there has to be some type of intention. And so with my work, I came into the scene with my Ted Bundy docuseries that's still not done. But in that, I basically took a masterclass of what ethics is when it comes to a name that big. If I say Ted Bundy in the true crime community, 99% of the time they know who I'm talking about, right? So taking that responsibility and making sure I do my due diligence to the people that I interview, the victims and those families and those communities. If I do not do that as a filmmaker, I do not show any respect to any of those individuals. And it's a responsibility. And that's something that I think we have to look at, you know, when we start on a new project, right? That is really morally what we're here to do. So at the end of the day, you know, I work with victims and their families every single week. That is my 9 to 5. I'm working under one of the most prolific true crime families, and they have dedicated their life to making sure that they're making ethical content and they're actually making a change. So I just want to stress, you know, I know what my morals are as a survivor as well. And I need to remember that these individuals deserve that same respect that I deserve. And being a proper advocate, you have to not just do it and say it, you really have to keep doing it and saying it. And I think that's how I ended back up here with my name in the true crime world right now. So there you go.
Bill Thomas, great answers, by the way. Bill Thomas in the chat said that it's a low barrier to entry. Anyone can podcast. And technically that's true. Anyone who has a sense of recording and, you know, can work their way around a microphone and you know, it's funny. I just looked down at my Zoom recorder and I thought I forgot to hit record, and I was about to just absolutely eat crow on that comment. But you know, anyone, as long as you have like a good sense of like technical, you know, good technical wherewithal, you can basically enter the podcast world. Do you think that there should be some sort of criteria if you're registering as like a true crime in the true crime genre? And how would you implement that?
No, look, I don't think so. I really value the democratization of content because there is a low barrier to entry. Because there's a low barrier to entry, there are voices and people who are getting platforms who otherwise never could or would. And I'm probably one of those people, frankly. But having said that, there isn't a low barrier to success. What's interesting to watch in this industry is who achieves like success, who is always invited to panels, who gets the magazine, coverage, who is celebrated and lauded despite people behind the scenes knowing like a lot of problematic history, right? Like, so the marketplace, kind of, and consumers will separate the whatever the wheat from the chaff. But so I don't think that we need to have any kind of like, like certificate. I don't know like what you're proposing, but certification for or anything to get into this industry. I think I love the fact that anybody can grab a mic and just start talking, because I think that's valuable for society. But what's troubling to most of us is just that, some of the things that are celebrated, and we were talking about this, we've talked about this numerous times offline, is like a very sensationalist, some of the most sensationalist aspects of true crime are celebrated. The sexualization of true crime is problematic. The turning a true crime podcaster into like this celebrity idol is problematic, where they're posing for sexy pictures. I mean, this nexus to me is weird, and I think leads to just some of the issues that we're facing. Like, I don't understand it even. But like, why are we turning people who are talking about like, some of the darkest and most difficult traumatic moments of somebody's life into like a pinup? You know what I mean? Like, they could come out with calendars if they wanted to. So, those are the things that, when those aspects are celebrated and they're rising to the top, I think that signals something's off.
I think I would agree with that. And I also agree that that the fact that there is access for everybody is great. And we probably have a lot of really good true crime content and ethical true crime content because somebody was able to just sort of jump in with what they could, equipment they could buy on Amazon or whatever. I think where the standards comes in and where there should be some checks and balances is in the ability for people. One of the things that we've seen emerging from the last few weeks is that there are a lot of people for whom there are problems that were not very well kept secrets. And there is difficulty. There is always difficulty in people in coming forward, and that is whether it is a victim of sexual misconduct, or even just like being sort of being shoved aside by people who maybe are not necessarily as qualified. Whatever it is, there are people who know what's going on, but there is often a fear that once somebody, once we're talking about the people who are sort of at the pinnacle or are the sort of the rock stars of the industry, it becomes almost impossible to speak about it without a tremendous amount of pushback, without, risk to your career. We see this in every entertainment genre, really in every profession. There are teachers who probably want to speak out about the superintendent, but they can't because they will probably get fired and, lose their healthcare, this kind of stuff. This goes on everywhere. So I think for me, the question is, how do we, do we prevent people from entering, but how do we make the table bigger and make it easier for people to talk about the problems when they see them happening, instead of waiting until it becomes an F5 tornado tearing up and tearing apart the entire community?
And
yeah.
Oh, go ahead. It's your.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I guess to expand on that, I think one of the biggest things I also have noticed just being in this space, and going off of what Sarah's saying, there's a lot of white content creators. And I'm not here to just say that as a woman of color. I'm saying that as coming into this industry, I knew I was going to have to fight a little bit harder. I knew I had to yell my name a little bit louder. I knew that the top dogs were men. I knew that coming into this. And then especially being in the TV and entertainment industry side of it, that's all that is, right? And this is a genre that is consumed by women, primarily women. And when we look at that and we hear predatory behaviors, you should probably take, those things seriously, because at the end of the day, what we have learned through the Me Too movement and the last 5 years, when there's one person and another one and another one and another one and another one, where does that end? So, I really feel like this discussion has been waiting to happen. And again, Rabia, Sarah, and myself, we come from different industries. However, we're unified in one. So when I say that we need to hold each other accountable, we need to make sure that we're giving spaces to all voices and to all stories. A lot of what we cover in true crime are white stories. We're not focusing on the marginalized individuals either. So again, just looking at this outside, looking in, I have to call these things out because I feel like right now I have a little bit of a voice. And if anybody can take away anything, it's just, understand that things aren't always what they seem.
Yeah, right. I think when people hear that perspective of simply having to fight that much harder to stand out in this industry that is essentially people who look a lot less handsome than Tim and I, but people who look similar to Tim and I are the ones that you have to, like, they're the ones that for whatever reason set the standard.
And I'm not throwing mud at y'all either. I'm not
throw you right off the
something.
show if we sense that.
Not what I'm doing.
No, not at all. I mean, we get it. We totally get it. And we totally appreciate and would like to do whatever we can to help the people who have very articulate, intelligent things to say and who can make progress and make movement in this. You have a platform for what reason? Yeah, to entertain, but there's a potential there that needs to be, there's a potential to do good that needs to be exploited. And if you can use your platform to do that, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So I think it's just important just to recognize what you said. Like, once again, it's the same story. People of color, women, they have to fight so much harder, and they have a lot of experience in speaking about these things and helping. So yeah, that's another standard. That's another thing, like what Sarah said, like, demand it from the audience, demand it from your peers too. Demand it from your peers to have conversations like this.
Yeah. Can I just say, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, demand it of yourself as well. So take care with the stories that you're choosing to tell. If you are a recognized and well-known, podcaster or TV producer, and you are, you are a white man or a white woman or whatever, maybe take care if you're choosing to tell the stories of other communities that you don't have the experience. It's not to say that that you can't do any of it, but if there is a way to perhaps bring in somebody who actually can speak to those experiences a little bit better. Again, it's a lot of men at the top telling stories about women to women. That kind of, like, when you think about the logic of that, it kind of doesn't, I had a friend today, and sorry, boys, I know this is going to be uncomfortable for you, but the ladies will understand.
Boys?
Yeah, gentlemen, sorry. No, a friend of mine at work today had a male colleague start, like, arguing with her about menstruation. And she was like, really, do we want to do this? And, like, so there is sometimes that, like, why are you talking at me about, the stories of people like me? And I think that certainly goes for me as a white woman too. And so therefore I will shut up now and stop hogging up the space. But I mean, we have to hold ourselves accountable, not just our peers.
I mean, the point Sarah's making right now is the issue around, like, expertise and qualifications. And look, even as an attorney who now, like, has done look, I came into doing wrongful conviction work, not from a criminal defense background. I practiced for 15 years, practiced law for 15 years, but I didn't do criminal defense work. I did immigration and civil rights. So I had to learn like this entire like legal industry that I didn't. And to this day, I'm still learning. But, you know, when I need a homicide investigator, I call people like Sarah and I call other experts. Like I broaden my base of expertise because I'm like, I don't know how to do it all, right? Like, and I think one thing we've seen over and over again is when one person does get not just plugged in, but they plug themselves into constantly, like I'm the expert on this, that, and the other, on everything. And nobody's the expert on everything. And I think learning to kind of like stay in your lane and own it, but also pull others into it. Like, you know, give others, like tap into all of the talent that is in the industry and say, you know what, you are really good on that and you're really good on that, and give others a chance. But I want to say something that we didn't say from the outset, and I want to say it because it's like, this is like the unspoken pretext of why we're all here. I think it's fair to say all of us are here because we want any survivor who's watching this to know that we support you, that we understand where you're coming from, that we know how difficult it is to come forward. We know that women are not believed over. We have seen this over and over again. We know that there's never an incentive for a woman to come forward because the world comes at her, because lawsuits come at her, because attacks come at her. She will be trolled and attacked for how she looks and how she acts and how she dresses. And it is the hardest goddamn thing in the world. So we just want to we should have maybe said that at the outset, but it slipped our minds that we want to say that we're here for the survivors of anybody who, you know, who has experienced misconduct, inappropriate behavior from anybody else in this industry. I also want to say, you know, there's accountability amongst ourselves. Like, you know, how do we as true crime podcasters like treat each other? And we have seen publicly, I mean, like, look, it's no secret that there is one guy who is obsessed with me for years and years and years, constantly attacks me. He's insane. He's lost like networks and sponsors and stuff like that. He comes at me. There's not a week he doesn't tweet about me. You know what I mean? Like and I just kind of like, I'm like, I don't have like the oxygen or mind space for it, but
it's violent stuff too. If people are not aware of this, like it's hideous and sicking other people on her. Like it's bad.
Oh, I mean, it's death threat level stuff that like, you know, he's asked his followers to come to my events. I mean, it's like all kinds of like problematic stuff. And there have been other podcasters who've said publicly, like kind of condemned it. And then he's come after them. And so for the most part, what will happen is a lot of podcasters will contact me privately and say, hey, we are so sorry, but like we're too small. We're a small show. We don't have, like, we don't want to come forward publicly because he could come after us with his hordes. And I get that. But at the end of the day, like, you know, solidarity means like, it doesn't have to be one person. It could be like 25 podcasters write a statement and say, you know, like, F you, man, like, what's wrong with you? You can't do this in our industry. So I do think we need to be better about having solidarity with each other. And then the second thing I want to say is that then we also have to be better with our like a lot of the issues that I'm hearing about popping up is because people do not have strong boundaries between them and their audiences. We have to give our audiences a little more respect. You can't be hopping into people's DMs and treating them they're just like, you know, like they're candy for you to pick from, right? Like, you know, these are people who are there because they respect you, you know, they admire you. Don't give them a reason not to do that, you know, but have some boundaries and have some respect for your audience, and interact with them in an appropriate way. And it just seems like I just hear too many stories of people not doing that. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So
sorry, a bunch of unrelated points.
No. That was great. That was great stuff. You mentioned solidarity, having more solidarity, I guess, as a community. I guess, what would that look like?
Kind of what you're seeing right now, I think, is the best way to put it. I mean, there are a lot of people who have been silent, who shouldn't be silent. And frankly, your silence speaks volumes. Mm-hmm. But we also know there are people who may be barred legally that can't say things. We also don't know business side of certain, you know, aspects, whatever it may be. But again, we're coming from an industry with sexual serial predation as a constant theme. And yet our community is still having a hard time grasping what, right? Because like I said, if there's smoke, there's fire somewhere in that. So, you know, this whole situation and why I chose to position myself where I'm at currently was merely as a warning, and also standing in solidarity with the victims, acknowledging that I too have my own experience. And, you know, it's not up for debate. It's not up for you to know all the details of every single situation that has happened. And again, like I said, if we haven't learned anything from the Me Too movement, I don't know how else to spell it out for people. I mean, you know, when I say that I'm a survivor advocate, that comes from a place of taking a 40+ hour training during the pandemic, and doing so to position myself as a crisis line advocate for any rape victims, and then moving over to help a local forensic nurse unit. And I volunteered my body with over 10+ rape kits performed. I mean, these are all things that I do to show my solidarity, my advocacy, but equally me as a survivor and how I heal with trauma. But I know I also get contacted by other survivors. So I have a responsibility there too. And as I shared in my tweet, I was an advocate for somebody in this whole story. So at the end of the day, I feel like my work should speak for itself and my values. So when I'm questioned and I'm debated and I see others being silent who have been vocal in the past about being there for survivors, I'm going to want to talk.
I mean, Celene just basically shared, like, you know, what is her personal drive and connection to this work. And I think for all of us who are in this space, we really should interrogate ourselves. What is motivating us to do this? Like, why are we really truly here? And I think our audience should also ask these questions. Why is this person doing this work? Because I think that'll just teach us a lot about, well, I think it'll reflect in the kind of work we're doing. And if either our work is like values based or it's not, you know what I mean? Like, but we have to first be like, why are we doing this? Why is this important to us? Why is this important to this? What does it add? What does this add to the world at the end of the day, right? Does it add anything or not?
Yeah, and it can't, I feel like supporting victims or claiming that, you know, your work is victim centric, that has become a brand in true crime, and we're not interrogating that enough. We're not asking people to back that up. Again, you know, some of it is credentials, some of it is getting, you know, perhaps lost in all the ancillary benefits that come with a rise in popularity or recognition or whatever. But, you know, if you are a content creator who is kind of jumping on what feels a little bit like a bandwagon right now, and it's a bandwagon that if it's true and it's taking hold, then I'm here for it, and that is victim centric rather than, you know, sort of misanthropic bad guy and like hero cop comes in and saved the day and the victim is just this unknown person who is barely mentioned. We still see a lot of that in journalism. We still see a lot of it even in true crime, but there is this sort of like I said, it's a lip service thing. It's like a brand now of like, I'm victim centric. And while I appreciate that people want that to be recognized and that I do think that the audiences, keep thinking about what you said, Rabia, like maybe I'm projecting a bit into how advocacy based the audiences are based on like kind of what what brought me into it. But I mean, like for the people who are advocacy based, like that they are demanding that. And that's good because that is the first part of it, is for people to demand respect for the victims. But for the people who are like, oh, this is going to be a great ship for me to sail to get to otherwise completely different goals. Those goals are fine. If you want to be a celebrity, there are a million ways to do it, but don't do it on the backs of traumatized and murdered people who, you know, you say you're there to tell a story and you really just there to navel gaze.
Yeah.
I just think we have to be careful about that.
I mean, and look, I mean, like I am not just a true crime content creator.
Right.
I am a consumer. I love all kinds of true crime. I love the investigative stuff, but I also love, you guys had Patrick Hines on today. I love Patrick's show. It's one of my favorite shows. I don't know what kind of advocacy angle we could come up with. You know what I mean? It might not exist at all. But what I enjoy, I mean, like, you know, when they covered Serial, I was like, I don't know who these people are, but there is nothing in the world about this case that could make me laugh. Like, I'm just angry and raging and sad all the time. But they actually did. They made me laugh because they picked up the stuff that's absurd that I'd never thought about. And they made me, I mean, like, they brought a perspective that was so fresh to me. And I've been like a fan ever since. And that is okay. It's okay. Because here's the thing. Patrick and others who are not going to be doing the deep investigative journalism, are not talking about advocacy, are not here to change the world in that kind of respect. At a minimum, they're operating by the standard of do no harm, right? Like, I mean, can that just at least be our minimum ethical standard in true crime? Is just do no harm. Start there. I know that. I mean, it seems like a really low standard, but I promise you, there are plenty of podcasts that cannot even pass that bar.
Yeah, that was a great introduction to that concept of where is the line between operating a show that is a comedy-based true crime podcast and a show that, like you said, does no harm. Like, I think True Crime Obsessed is a brilliant example of a show that will raise the awareness of a case, make you laugh.
Yeah.
And I think that laughter there opens you up a little bit more to learning about the messier details, the more disturbing details. And the way they do that is really brilliant. And I don't know if that was their intent from the start, but we know that they recognize that they have that power to make you laugh, introduce you to this docuseries, which would introduce you to the case, which will perhaps do some good. And I think some people don't get that, or they'll look at it and just say, it's disrespectful, and they'll write it off, which is unfortunate because there are ones that are so disrespectful that don't realize it. So love that first step, like, hey, just look at it and say, is this doing any harm? Well, how can I change that? And Tim and I started, and we were so green to the whole thing, and we didn't consider reaching out to the family because we didn't know. And once we did know, we tried to change things, and we tried to operate much differently. And hopefully we came a little ways with that. But I think that was just simply a product of, there hadn't been conversations like this. And it was simply coming from an environment that sensationalized true crime and not knowing that you could do something better.
Well, and I think just the fact that you're even identifying that, right? Because I have things on my side that I've done wrong, and I will take full responsibility of that. But I think also, as content creators, again, what I would hope is that once you start engaging with some of these families or having these discussions, or you're going to events and meeting other people with these experiences, then it dawns on you, hey, would I be comfortable sharing this thing with so-and-so's mother, right? Like, if it's not, and I just kept thinking to myself, if these were look at social media and what it takes people to call me.
Am I the only one that's
as well? Like, that happened too. So, oh no, am I frozen?
Yeah, we had some connectivity issues there. Yeah. Would you want to?
Now, I think.
Am I back?
Yeah.
So sorry.
Would you want to take that point over if you've still got it?
Trying to remember where it froze.
Sorry. Yeah.
No worries. No, I was just saying, again, just holding ourselves accountable and recognizing that we can grow as content creators. And I think, over the course of the 5 years that I've been in true crime, I'm noticing that. And I'm noticing, again, people saying, hey, we messed up here. I can say that I messed up in, my earlier work. But again, it's like, if you don't have the approval, of maybe an individual in your content, whether that a family member, friend, however it is, and you should be respecting that. No. And being this way again, and who has really opened this can of worms? No one, because everyone kind of knows we've all fucked up somewhere in our work. And again, we have to just say, I take accountability for that. I will do better. Let me show you.
Yeah. Got to be some accountability and self-awareness, I would say, as well, because there are no certificates that we get when we enter this field. As much as that sounds like kind of fun to have one, you kind of got to develop your own ethics, and Lance and I speak about this a lot, I guess, because we're lucky to have each other. If we were just solo doing our thing, I'm sure we would have made more mistakes than we actually made.
But that's the whole point of it, right? So you guys have each other for your show, but in reality, not to sound hokey, the entire community has each other. And we can, like you said, know better, do better. We can check each other respectfully. It just has to be a willingness. It has to be a willingness from everybody to hear that. And if you're unwilling to hear that, then perhaps your motives aren't entirely pure. If you're unwilling to hear that what you have done might have caused a little bit of harm, then you maybe you are going to do damage in the space if you can't handle constructive criticism from your peers and your colleagues. And so it's great that you guys have each other sort of built in, but we can expect that of all of us. And that's, I think like what Celene was talking about, where we have seen in the last few weeks, and certainly some of us, I think a lot of female content creators, and I don't know if I know a single female content creator who is not a survivor of sexual violence. We notice who is not choosing, who's trying to see which way the wind is blowing, as opposed to saying, I don't have to know the details to know how difficult it is to come forward even a little bit. And so I believe you regardless.
Yeah. Look, can I add to that when a person decides to go public with one of the most difficult, traumatic, and honestly, as somebody who's also a survivor of both GV and SV, something that can feel deeply shameful. When somebody decides to go public, you know why they do that? It's because there's no other recourse for them. They cannot find accountability anywhere else. They've been waiting for somebody to say, you can't do that. And a lot of times, some of the people that, we all know who we're talking about here, but Celene said, where there's smoke, there's fire. People have been witnessing the smoke and the fire for years. They have continued to work with these people, knowing what's happening, not saying a word, not just to them, not finding a way to like shut it down, not like until the victims finally have to put themselves out there, it completely expose themselves to everything that comes back at you from the public. When you decide to go public, it is so hard to go public. Then finally they're like, oh, okay, well now maybe let's shut down the show and let's do this and let's do an investigation, even though they've known this stuff for years, right? So I am really troubled by the fact that you have people who've continued, co-hosts and producers and others who've continued to work with people who are probably committing crimes, if not at a minimum making their female peers incredibly unsafe, right? And they've just gone along with it as long as they could get by. I think that's insane to me. I do want to say one more thing though, as and I'm saying this as a lawyer, and I'm saying this to my female peers in this space, is that look, when something happens to you, when you have been assaulted in some way, it is really, it will take women maybe years to be able to talk about it or come forward, or maybe they never do. But I do want to say that for your sake, for the sake of maybe some accountability at some point in the future, it is important to try to document stuff, contemporary journaling, like, you know what I mean? Like, write it down. If you can't talk to anybody about it, talk to a friend about it. I'm not kidding. I mean, like 4 or 5 years later, those people might be the people who as witnesses can back up what you are saying when you finally, if you finally have the courage to come forward or the drive to come forward for whatever reasons. I mean, like, but when you, if and when you have like experienced something unfortunate like that, make sure it doesn't just disappear into a void. Like, try to document that somewhere, even if it's just for your own self. I mean, like in a journal or something, because as a lawyer, that can prove mighty valuable down the road if you ever want to like try to hold somebody accountable.
And one thing that I just want to add on to that, and the other issue and we have to be cognizant about power dynamics. Power dynamics in any industry, it's very easy to fall under prey. Like, plain and simple, that's a part of what my statement was. You know, so it doesn't mean just because, you know, this is our daily life, we miss the signs. We can. But again, I think that all derives from
having some more connectivity issues
through
there.
this right now in real time. We're all hurting right now. And I think that really should be recognized. Last few weeks, they're not great. And they haven't been great. And imagine holding that for months or years. So again, I just want to say that I stand with any survivors, anyone who has an experience. I believe you, and just know that.
Yeah, seconded.
I'm just sitting back and really in awe of the direction this conversation went and how it all relates to the one universal topic that we started with, or two, I guess, the ethics and standards. And everybody has a different background and a different reason why they're going about doing this. And then there's that problem that's out there that seems to stem from I think Celene Beth said recognize the power dynamic and recognize like how that can be used in an abusive way, in an abusive manner. And having each one of you talk about your backgrounds and where you come from and how that is applicable to this abusive, exploitative power dynamic is, I mean, 53 minutes in, and I can't even tell you how many notes I have just from the takeaways, and it's remarkable. So it's clear that the three of you have had this in you for a long time. Yeah.
Which is why I suggested, bringing these two on, because I know they have been screaming, some of these things. And again, we've just been sitting here dancing around it. And again, it's not just one isolated individual. There are others. Like, I just want to be clear. It's at the end of the day, as creators, as a small community, like we've said from the beginning, holding each other accountable, making sure that we are standing in solidarity for the right reasons, for the right people, that your intentions are not there for your own gain. We all had something to lose by coming forward. And I think that should be recognized as, professionals. Again, like I said, my 9 to 5 is true crime, unscripted television. And that could have really hurt my career. But at the end of the day, it's not about my career. It's about the fans and the vulnerable individuals involved. And again, I don't know who else is out there that may be hurting. But I'm tired of sweeping it under the rug, frankly.
Yeah,
So women are, sorry, go ahead.
No, all you.
No, I was going to say women are often the canaries in the coal mine, and to the men in the industry some of who have now been publicly called out. It's one of those things where if you're hearing 2 stories, there's probably 15 that you haven't heard yet. But also, like, you should know, we have grapevines, we talk. It's not, you can't get away with this stuff forever. I mean, like, we warn each other, right? Like, so we want to protect each other. And just because you might think you're powerful enough to intimidate women into not coming forward, there will be a breaking point. There will be a breaking point. And just because you might be a little celebrity icon doesn't mean you can get away with it forever.
Yeah, and especially if you're not a criminal profiler or a psychological expert, you may not recognize when you have tried to push forth the power dynamic on the wrong woman. And I think sometimes that you know what I mean, like you may be too clever by half if you are thinking that you can just sort of continually prey on women on any level, whether it's just pushing them around professionally, all the way up to assault and everything in between. You might be reading the wrong room and not realize that like Rabia said, we talk. It's going to come out. It's going to come out. You're going to make the wrong call. So check yourself before you wreck yourself.
I knew when you started saying that, I
knew
that
I was going to end up.
End.
That's funny because I didn't realize I was going to end up there till right at the end. So I think that speaks to how in sync we are. I kind of wanted to echo what Rabia said too. I also really enjoy some heartfelt levity in my true crime content as a consumer, because I am also a rabid consumer, and it doesn't have to all be like emotionally exhausting for 60 minutes of you know what I mean, like episode by episode by episode, not by any means. I mean, and I think Celene and I have done interviews together with you. I've done the crime and culture thing with you guys a couple of times, and I said Rabia hadn't worked with you guys before, and I said to her tonight before we did this, I said I really feel like these guys always do a good job of allowing the light to come in at the right times. So I thank you for always doing that. I've talked about really, really dark, hard cases with you. And we've been able to laugh with the audience and stuff too at the right moments. So I appreciate that from you guys.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, that's obviously something that we find important when we're telling these stories, because again, when you open it up and you have a laugh, and it's not at the expense of a victim or a victim's family, it breaks some ice, like it breaks some barrier with your listeners, and it becomes more of a personal conversation. And I think Tim always says it, Tim always says, the podcast medium is so personal because you're literally like you're in their ear. Like, it's like, you're right there with them, and you're talking, you're talking with them. You're not talking to them or at them. And the laughter does it. The laughter is a key thing to just say, hey, we're all learning. We're all like in this together. And I love the idea of accountability and ownership, because again, Tim and I have talked about this. Once we were able to like take accountability for stuff, like it feels good when you're able to say like, damn, I fucked that up bad. Like, I don't know if that's something that we can come back from, but you have to take accountability. The worst that'll happen is that people will say, you fucked that up. And then you say, I know, and I'm trying to change it.
And be honest with your audience and tell your audience that. I think it's really important to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And then leave it out there, leave that apology out there, leave it out there for people to see, this person's not completely flawless just because they managed to buy a microphone and figure out how to hit record and, get an RSS feed, which I'm still confused about, but maybe give me another 6 years.
I am too. Rabia was talking about RSS feeds earlier, and I was nodding along like I understood everything, but I really don't.
Sarah, I'll see you in like 5 minutes down in my
I know.
basement. We'll talk
for
about
the
it.
audience who doesn't know, I am at Rabia's house right now. We are just in different rooms.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I just
Go
want
ahead.
to button up that ownership thing. Taking ownership for not having this conversation sooner. Like, I feel like we should do that as well and not push for something like this. And the thing about that is it has to start somewhere. So I'm glad we're starting here.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for
Yeah.
letting us start here.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for joining us tonight. Is there anything else? Any final points that anyone would like to make here?
I feel like we hit on some really good stuff. We hit on,
Okay.
some accountability for yourself, for your audience, and for fellow creators. And check yourself before you wreck yourself. and I really, Rabia's point about documenting in some way or telling one trusted person is so important, because I think we're actually even seeing elements of that in this current discussion, where people are pushing back on some people and claiming that they're jumping on this or that or whatever. And then there are contemporaneous witnesses who are coming forward and saying, no, this person told me about this when it happened. So it's very real. And it just, you're protecting yourself. If you can tell one person, or I don't know, Rabia, legally, would it be a good idea to put it into like an email, even in a draft, because then there's like metadata on it, like that can prove that it's true? Or okay.
Yeah. Even journals, I mean, even like personally handwritten journals, I mean, like, can be used to that effect. But certainly something dated like an email is always a great idea. I mean, look, the last thing I just want to say is this, that I can virtually guarantee there are women who are victims who have not come forward and who are worried about coming forward. I want you guys to understand that all the women I know who have known anything about any of these stories over the years have been incredibly protective of victims, have never gone public with their stories, still will not name their names, are letting people tell their own stories, which means that there are peers you can reach out to, say, I want to share this. Or if you're an audience member, that, listen, I need to share this with somebody. I'm not ready to go public, but I need to share this with somebody. I personally, listen, I'm kind of a vengeful person where I'm just like, out all of them. Just out them, expose them all, destroy them. They should not be like operating in space where they have any kind of power. They should not have, like, predators should not have be in a position of any kind of power, because they don't even know how not to exploit that power. And so I just would urge others who might be out there who are wondering, should I come forward or not, that you can come forward in a safe way. That's not a public way. If you reach out to any of us or any other women in the industry that you trust and say, listen, I want to share my story. I might not be ready to go public with it, but I need to talk to somebody about it. Talking to others it really does help liberate a lot of pain.
And I'll just round that out with, again, echoing exactly what these two have said. But I really just want to stress, understand that we are real people. We see and hear a vast majority of everything that, your opinions or whatever you may think. And I know there are individuals that want all of the evidence, as they would as they're consumers of true crime. But in a lot of these situations, there is not substantial evidence for you to look at and review. So I just really want to stress, as Sarah said, there are reasons why certain people have chosen to speak, and there are others who haven't. I think it's really important that we recognize, again, there are legalities. There are issues at hand where people cannot speak. please do not hold a torch to those people. I think that's really important, but there are people who should be speaking that are not speaking. And I don't want to allude to anybody in specific because there's numerous people, as we said, we know, we recognize, and we understand that this is a small community. People talk. That's what happened. So just know that, again, we are all real people. There are people who aren't out in the open right now who are really hurting. And I just hope that we can all share space and safe space for those individuals.
Well said. All right.
Well
Yeah,
said to,
well,
to all.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. Really appreciate this. I think this was a productive conversation. Good start of this conversation, at least for us. I know, speaking personally, and sort of, I guess, getting this idea out there to our audience. Before we go, Sarah and Rabia, what episode of Only Murders in the Building are you starting with tonight? What's happening here with this marathon?
Oh, we're starting season 2 from episode 1.
Oh, okay, good. All right.
Yeah, we've been waiting.
Yeah, we've got 3 episodes as of today that we get to binge. That's why we're like, let's do
Yeah.
it for a Tuesday night so that we could. So I drove down from Philly so we can tear through the first 3. 'cause
Yeah,
we've
we
been
haven't
dying
touched
for-
season 2 yet. Yeah.
Okay, I gotta catch episode 3 then. That's what that means. I'm gonna do this right after this.
Yeah, no spoilers.
Yeah.
I also want to say that everybody in the chat here on YouTube was really engaged in this and really respectful and understanding of everyone's stories and what we're trying to do. So big thanks to everybody who showed up. All 35,000 of you. Really, I thought we were going to crash YouTube. Not 35,000. We did have to, it was probably the most we've had, and that's good. Like, the more ears on it, the better. And I really look forward to part 2 at some point sooner than later.
Anytime. You let us know.
Thank you guys. Have a
Thank
good
you,
night.
guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
gentlemen.